I moved to the Bay Area right after high school, 94. And then I went to San Francisco State, and then I lived there for a couple years in Oakland. I've been in the Bay Area longer than I've been in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So like over, what is it? Almost over 20 years, 20 some years. But I love Oakland.
And that's just a weird threshold to cross. I'm pretty sure I've crossed it in New York, and it's just, it's strange when you get that point, because obviously strange. Like time moves a lot differently as you get older. Yeah, totally.
And like I always see Pittsburgh as my home, even though like most of my family lives here now, and I've been to Pittsburgh. I visited Pittsburgh last year, but I haven't been there for a while. But it's everything, like all the things that the sports teams, and I think that keeps me thinking that, all the nostalgia feelings. But when you're away from home, it's more nostalgic and more positive than when you're actually living where you're at.
I was out in the South Bay last week, and I went to an A's game, and I don't know if you've been to an A's game at any point in the last couple of years. I grew up 20, 30 minutes away, and I used to see the games, and they were like, when I was really young, they were a really good team, and I have all these great memories. And obviously, I was going back and forth on whether or not I even wanted to go, and whether or not I wanted to sort of support the ownership of what's happening. But I went, and it was just desolate is the only word I can use.
Yeah.
It was eerie.
Like a shell. Yeah. It wasn't too busy, huh? I suspect.
You could walk for like 5 minutes and not see anybody inside the Coliseum.
Who were they playing?
They were playing the Rangers, which,
That's still,
division
it's still
rivals.
Solid, yeah.
It was a Thursday night. There should have been people there.
I have a feeling that people were just like, we're done. We're done with this team. And especially after, all the news that they were just decided to just quit Oakland. So I'm sure not a lot of fans want to come to the game after that.
It is interesting how sports teams they can help to sort of tether you to. I know Pittsburgh isn't technically East Coast. It's sort of like that cusp.
The Mid-Atlantic. Yeah, between Midwest and East.
I have this strong, because of all the A's stuff that's been happening, I've been having conversations with people about maybe following another team. And I have all of these reasons why I've ruled out most of the teams, and I ruled out everybody on the East Coast because I can't stand East Coast sports fans.
Yes. I haven't been, I mean, it depends. Like, I'm so a part of the Steeler and Pirates fandom that I don't have that perspective from the outside of looking in and seeing, wow, these are like the most horrible, offensive, obnoxious fans. And I hear that, and I'm just like, I don't see that. I don't understand. We're just supporting our team. We're not like, Flyer fans or Eagles fans.
I'm not really sure. I mean, the Steelers maybe. I don't know. The Pirates fans seem fairly mellow, but
they're mellow now because they're sort of like a minor league feeling.
They've been not good for a long time, but like compared to literally every Philly team, they seem pretty chill.
Yes, it's just they're like a feel good team, but it's just like a bittersweet you're very torn because you want the team to succeed and you want to root for these players because they're really cool guys. Andrew McCutchen is super cool. He came back, and there was this whole time where they were leading the NL for a couple weeks there, and now it's sort of kind of evening out. And he's brought this mojo back that hasn't happened since 2012 or something. That playoffs, the wild card with Cueto. They were like, Cueto, and he dropped the ball and all this craziness, and soon we won that wild card. But so that magic feeling is stuff that just Pirates fan love, but at the same time they know that their ownership is very greedy and doesn't want to pay for anybody to make a real successful run at anything. Although they seem to have done a couple of good signs early in the season, but I don't know. I think that's just sort of like for show for a little bit. I don't know. I don't think it's anything. I mean, people still come. I mean, people like their bobbleheads, and it's a great stadium, and it's a great time. So I think there's always going to be somebody coming.
So what did you study in school?
I went to San Francisco State University, and then I studied art. I studied conceptual design. It was art with an emphasis of conceptual design and information arts. And basically it was, conceptual art, like post-modern, digital video art, like, Nam June Paik type stuff, and
multimedia.
Semiotics, yeah. And, but then it was like you could use like computer technology to make art, so like robotics. But then it got into like, Photoshop. Like this is when Photoshop was in Photoshop and InDesign. And so we were making all sorts of art through computer stuff. And so then when I graduated, I was like, I'm just going to be a painter. I'm not going to do conceptual design or anything like that. And it's like, what would I don't know. I guess I could do installation art and performance art. But then because I learned all these skills, I got into I had this web career, and this was during the 90s and like .com, early aughts. And so I found myself like being a web designer and I still kind of am like a web content person. So, that helped as a day job. Especially in the Bay Area.
During that bubble. Yeah, in the Bay Area during that bubble. That's a nice thing it sounds like effectively fall into.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so that's what I was doing. And then I just started making comics again. I found comics again. I loved comics like when I was a kid early on. And then I kind of just stopped and did other art making. And then I found it when I just like saw like in my bookstore, like from my day job, they're Stacy's. And I just found like a collection of Adrian Tamina's work. And I was like, wow, this is new stuff I've never seen before. Like really different than what I saw in the library years ago.
Just like right in the wheelhouse, like Asian American. And I think, wasn't he in Oakland at the time?
I don't know if he was in New York.
He was in the Bay Area.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But he was a Bay Area guy initially. Oh,
totally. Yeah. He was like from Sacramento and then Berkeley and then, and then he was living in Oakland or Berkeley? He was living in like the borderline of Berkeley and the border.
It is an amazing moment. And I heard a lot of cartoonists describe that. So there's like, there's a couple of paths I hear. And for me, I was like the 12-year-old boy reading like superhero comics who ended up kind of coming back around to it. Unless you've somehow managed to like just be immersed in it from a young age, that moment of realizing that like what can be done with this medium that you thought you knew is pretty incredible.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. And that you yourself can make comics, like the whole do-it-yourself aesthetic of it, of making mini comics. And, because before, like when I knew about comics was Sunday Funnies. And so I always was like, I'm going to have my own syndicated strip and that's what I'm going to do. And then realizing that wasn't possible, I just went ahead and just kind of felt like, okay, I'm going to do adult art, I'm going to be an adult now and make real art. I'm going to be a painter and people will buy my paintings and I'll be in galleries and it's all highbrow type stuff. But it's just, interesting. Like I just went away from it for so long and then to come back and then to see, it was really interesting because I also was, when I first dated like my now husband, I was at his house and he had a roommate. His friend Derek. And he's also from Fremont. You might know him. And they had like all these graphic novels, and I was like, just like, what is this stuff? I've never seen this stuff. And like, John Porcellino stuff, and like Chester Brown stuff, and so it's like everything that was going on in the punk scene as well, because they were punk guys. So that was just really cool to see all that at the time.
I mean, it's small, but an indie comics community has sort of sprouted in Pittsburgh. in the last like decade or so, it seems like.
Well, I remember, like, I think like right after I left, I found out that there was an actual scene going on there. Like, you know, Jim Rugg and Ed Piskor and this whole, you know, Rob Rogers and
Santoro and
Santoro and Copacetic Comics. And so yeah, I was like, dang, why did I stay for a while? So but you know, I wasn't really thinking about comics when I left. I was just like, I just need to leave. But also here it's interesting. Like, there's so many cartoonists that live in Oakland and in like this particular neighborhood, and it's just like they all sort of converged, and there's no real reason why. It's just really interesting how communities sprout up. And that's the cool thing about indie comics. Like, that's the whole thing, is communities, really, I think.
I was thinking about this earlier because and I don't know how much of this is me sort of just not being in touch with it the way I used to. Part of it's like just getting older and my job and all these things. Mm-hmm. This is going to sound like some old man stuff because it kind of is, but I don't, it doesn't feel like there is community in New York City the same way there was like 15 years ago. I think rent's probably a big part of that, but you're in the Bay Area, so obviously it's not that much more livable out there.
Oh yeah, no, and a lot of people moved away from the Bay Area too. But I think also maybe the whole thing with social media and being online, that the community kind of takes another form. It's in another kind of form where it's not so much as in person, but it's all online now. And I don't know, you know, we don't have as many shows as we used to either. But I think they're coming back, and, you know, especially after the pandemic. And I think a lot more people are showing up because of that feeling of when you need to see people in person. And that was the cool thing when I went to Toronto. I hadn't been to a comic show in like 3 years or even more than that, because I'm not really good at selling my stuff at shows, but I like to visit. But, you know, because Ape isn't around, there really isn't a show, which is crazy. There isn't a show here in the Bay Area.
Is WonderCon, is that still?
No, it's down in Anaheim.
Oh, there was another show other than Ape. I can't remember what it was called. It was there's a
Zine Fest that's actually still happening, yes. But there isn't like a comics-specific, comics-focused. I mean, there's small comic shows that are definitely have come up recently, which is cool. So there are like a bunch of... I know that there are a bunch of different groups that are, like, especially young groups that I feel very excited about, that are like that to see, because there actually are communities still happening, like people coming together and drawing. Like, Silver Sprocket is one of those places that totally champions a lot of young cartoonists in the Bay Area. So I still like that it's the whole kind of punk feeling, DIY, remember, like Global Hobo, like that feeling is still out there in the Bay Area. And yeah, totally. I know that you say like I feel like old man stuff, but I think when I came to the show again for the first time in a while, I realized that I am in this new era in my comics, you know, career or whatever this is, that I am now the older, like this generation of like saying, well, back in the day we did this, you know, like it's like, and I don't know how I feel about being in that position. Like, well, back in the day we had, you know, photocopies, and we had these things called mini comics, and we actually made them at a photocopy store, you know, because I just think like, is that something that's still happening? Like, why do I need to tell that story? But, you know, it's just interesting that, okay, yeah, I think now we actually have to give some context to a lot of the things, a lot of the comics we were making, or a lot of the comics we were reading, because it's definitely still, it's stuff that's come, you know, that's a lot longer than we perceive it as being. It's been just come around last year. I think there's a lot of explanation around certain comics that we make, and which I find that I realize that we need to talk about and stuff like that.
Have you read Julia's new book yet?
Julia Wertz?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet.
There's a great moment in there where she realizes that she's the older generation, I think, going to SPX, and she's like very She's very excited. She's like very excited, which is just a really funny moment because I haven't really seen it contextualized like that. Because like for me, the old person thing was always they would always talk about there used to be a softball game after SPX. I would hear that every year, the softball game. And SPX was so much better back then, and we tend to think of it. I mean, one, like obviously anything that reminds us of our mortality is not a good thing, but also that it's sort of crotchety. But maybe, I don't know, maybe there is something to that. Maybe there is something empowering in being an elder statesperson in a certain sense.
Yeah, I just feel like I don't know how much wisdom I can imbue to these kids. I feel like they just know what they're doing, and I think they're on a good path. And so that's why it's like I don't have anything to tell you. But I always think that the vanguard is always like, you know, Dan Clowes or I don't know,
Adrian.
Yeah, okay, even Adrian, even though I think Adrian's still 15, like, you know, because it's like optic. And so for me, seeing myself in this, like, oh, you've been here for a while, is just, you know, and people asking me questions about, like, how did they do, how did you first come up? It's just like, oh, I'm getting those questions now, you know. Yeah, it makes you feel like you've, like, been a part of something, though. Like, you have this, you're part of some legacy, which, yeah, I don't mind that. It's fine.
I should preface this by saying I don't think I know there was never an easy time to make a living as a cartoonist, but yeah, I do think that period that coincided with the, you know, the 90s boom that we're talking about, like a lot more people were able to do it. You know, you mentioned like Dan and Peter Bagg and all you know, the Hernandez brothers, all that generation. And I wonder if there's an extent to which you kind of will always hold those people as elder states people because, you know, they've got these big books and they were published in a way that has been increasingly hard to do, right? I mean, and it does seem to also have coincided with all the, you know, sort of the late capitalism things that we're dealing with, that like millennials are dealing with generally, of, you know, not being able to buy a house, that also at the same time, it's just impossible to make a living doing art in the way it was, you know, 30 years ago.
Yeah. But I also feel like I don't even know if they were making money off of comics, though. I think they were all doing it through like illustration work, you know, commercial work for sure. But and then, you know, I don't know if the book deals were as big as they are now. Like YA, you see some pretty big deals. But I do think that you can, but I don't think it's like the majority of cartoonists are making, you know, a career just solely on making comics.
For our contemporaries, it's going to be like Rina, right? She'll be...
Yeah.
That, or probably is right now, that person, because she is somebody that just completely blew it wide open, right?
Mm-hmm. Or maybe even Jean Yang.
A lot of people in that kind of like first second.
Yeah, first second. For sure.
You were at TCAF?
I was. It was really nice to see people again, and the last time I was at TCAF was the first time for me, which was like around 2012. And that was the first time I met Annie Koyama ever. And I think that might have been her first show, I want to say, as Koyama Press. And I remember that clearly because I was repping for Dylan Williams and Sparkplug. And so I went there, and we were all the publishers, all the main publishers, except D&Q, they were able to get out of this room. Were stuck in this room because they wanted to...
I'm sure that they prioritized the Canadian company, too.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that, too, yeah. Yeah, I think Fantagraphics was also in this room. Maybe, I think. And then...
Annie's from Toronto, but yeah, if it was her first show.
It was like her first show, and it was, yeah. And... so we were all stuck in this room, and like it was me and Annie, all like right kind of next to each other, and it was just so cool to see her with her artists. Like, she is one who like really champions her artists, and all of them would just come visit her and just like show her so much like adoration and love, and it was just like such a feel good thing, and I was just always like, who is this woman? Like, who is this amazing woman? And and so then I got to see her again. We had dinner, and it was just a great feeling to just see that, and from after like how many years, like a decade, and that we're, where we are now, basically, is interesting.
She's not publishing anymore, right?
No, but she's helping, she's been helping a lot of artists, like, help get off the ground, like, a lot of their projects.
Oh, she's got her grant fund.
Koyama provides.
I mean, obviously, that kind of thing could exist here. I mean, the Zero grant was maybe as close as I can think of. I don't even, is that still, I don't even know if that's still a going concern.
I think so. I should check into that and see if I can submit.
Canada generally is a much better place to try to be an artist.
Yeah, because you can get more grants there, right?
Yeah, they support the arts the way they
support the arts. But I've noticed that, there are a lot of good, cool residencies here. So a lot of great artist residencies. So I've been seeing those more, which is cool.
How much of your time these days is actually spent making comics?
Well, I mean, this past year, I really just kind of quit and focused on making this book, The Man in McIntosh Suit, that's out. And so I've just sort of taken a break from other work and just focused on making comics and just doing more art, creative projects that I've kind of pushed for a long time. And I'm just kind of in this time in my life where I feel like it's not too late to try this out, and it's not
to try to like make a go at it.
Yeah, to make a go at it, and to like kind of be really like practical and mature and rational with my decision making, but also, it's not like I'm not too old, and I'm not as young as I used to be. So like I just feel like this might be like a sweet spot to just try it and see what happens. And also I just need a break from doing some web stuff. It's just like a lot, and just takes up your time. And I just it was just a good time to just focus on comics. So that's what I'm doing, is like it's just funny to hear it because it's never been something I could say, but yeah, I'm like a full-time cartoonist artist right now. But in the Bay Area, yeah, I have a husband that helps, so it's financially.
You have to have like a conversation, right? To just be like,
right,
can we figure this out?
I have a son, so it's like, thankfully he's in public school, and the public school was great. Yeah, so there is definitely a conversation, and so I don't know. Ken has always been my comics, so like people know Ken from my work, and so they always know him as a supportive guy. He's a writer in his own right, so he knows about following dreams, and so. But we'll just see how it goes, Brian.
That's the thing, right? You can't both follow your dreams at the same time.
Right. He knows. Yeah, I might just find another web job by the end of the year.
When you do something like that, I mean, obviously, you're able to finish this book, which is great. I mean, you've already been getting some really good reviews around it. Do you go into it giving yourself a set timeline? I actually do, and I'm not conservative about it. Like, I'm just, people will tell me like it takes a while to really get, kind of get stable in this career, but I feel like my timeline, is a little bit, my window is a smaller window. But as an artist, like, it's not just like comics. Like, I feel like it's like all sorts of things that I'm interested in doing. It's like writing, graphic design, web, it's all sorts of things. So there's so much potential, I think. So there's so many opportunities and paths. So we'll see. It's just like that web career. It's like I never thought I was going to be in a web career. So who knows where I'm going to go? I'm going to be next year. I'm not going to say that a web career is stable, but it definitely has more potential for stability than being a full-time artist.
True.
When you're sort of setting aside this time, I mean, obviously it sounds like the number one thing was working on this book, but now you're kind of looking around at other things that you can do kind of in and around art. But ultimately, when you sit down and you say, hey, like, you know, I've been doing this for a long time, I'm going to like make a go at it in a really meaningful way. Does it make more sense to just focus on that one medium for most of the time?
Well, with comics is, you know, I'm just so used to it being that one job that like I just am trying so hard to have. And so like once you have it, it's like, oh wow, this is a job now. So like it's sort of like the whole like thrill of it is just like, so it's like basically if you're like I'm not thrilled with it, it's like, okay, I guess I'm just gonna go into graphic design now, or I'm gonna go into writing now. I don't know. But I feel like having some variety helps, and in any kind of art making is like just trying different formats or different mediums helps kind of shape the way you are as an artist. And like even any career really, like if you're like in marketing or if you're just in admin, like it's you gain skills that help you in this like career that is an art career, you know, like you gain business skills, you gain administrative skills. So I mean, for me personally, yeah, I feel like more variety, the better. Like getting my hands in all different things is more exciting. And that's like always the hardest part about comics. It's just it's always such a singular, production-oriented thing, and a tedious thing that sometimes, yeah, you just want to quit and not do it anymore, you know. And so, I mean, I see a lot of cartoonists just going into other mediums, which is cool, like, you know, animation or videos and or just writing. And so I don't know, I think it's just exciting. I mean, just as an artist, like just that's really the fundamental thing is just it's just finding new ways to make stories and experimenting in different things. Being
so laser focused on something, you know, as well as anybody, takes a long time to do a full-length book. And I assume that, you know, given the subject matter, not just like the subject matter, but like the actual story contained therein and some of the elements, that it probably was at certain points emotionally draining or emotionally exhausting. Once you were finished it, you were really glad you were done with it. And there is that sort of that period of like really feeling burned out. And maybe for some people feeling like, hey, I never want to do it again, until you want to do it again.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like, it's sort of like Stockholm syndrome. It's like going into labor and then like, I'm never doing that again. Like that was the most horrific experience, traumatizing. And then you're like, I want to have kids, you know, I want to have another one. But yeah, with making this book, it wasn't as, I mean, well, making like anything, like with, like I tend to like, I do it, I have a deadline and I can't look at it anymore. Like, I don't want to look at it. I don't, but,
I get that.
I shove all the originals in a drawer and I can't look at it. But then like later on when I have to dig into those originals to like for some show or whatever, or a gallery thing. And I read them again and I'm like, wow, that was actually a pretty good story I did there. You know, like, so I don't know. Yeah. I think because you're so into it and you've just been like looking at the same thing forever that it's just not, you just get bored with it. Not bored, but just like, I just don't want to see it anymore, you know?
Never having given birth to a child myself, I can't speak to this personally, but I do think that it's a good analogy in the sense that, no, it's not quite that you want to go through that again in the sense that like you want to go be in labor again, but it's that you came out the other side with this thing that you really like and you want to get another one of those things. Exactly. Yeah. Like, I mean, and it's just like the feeling of accomplishment, you know, it's addictive and exciting and thrilling. And so of course you want to feel that again. And with this book particularly, you know, it was like, I don't think it was a long, crazy process where I'm like, I'm never going to do that again. Because I am really excited in where this is going. Like I feel like there's a lot more opportunities to tell more stories of these characters, and so I'm excited to tell more. So I'm just like thrilled by the response to it, and just
people, like Filipino, like people just reading it and just being excited about the representation. I think it's great, and just like I just am happy with how it came out, and I'm just happy I had a really great production crew with Megan Tan and Trona Corley and Frances Eula, who's my editor. So they're two really talented Asian women, and I think we just had a really good group, and so I'm really proud of the whole package of it, like just making it and the collaboration, and so the experience of making it was rewarding enough that I wanted to do it again.
Yeah, not just do it again, but you alluded to this a little bit, but I was also, I think, reading an interview that you did a little while back, but is it a trilogy? Is that, or there are going to be more books with this character?
I mean, I always thought, when I thought of this idea back in like 2010, like right after Whirlwind Wonderland, I had an idea of like this was going to be a series of like floppy comics. Remember those things? So I felt like this is like an ongoing series that can go on forever, and so yeah, I see it as like at least a trilogy, but we'll see how it goes. Like I don't know in what format or whatever. But it's always been the case that I wanted it to be more than one book. Wow,
13 years ago now, when you had that initial idea, like what was the idea, and how closely does it hew to the book that is out in the world now?
So I think the central part of the story of this of Bulbut being the lead character was always like I always was interested. I don't even know where he came from, but I was always into like hardboiled detective stories. I was into film noir and
drawing fedoras
and drawing fedoras and suits was a big thing. Now I'm just really sick of drawing hats. But yes, I had this idea in my head that I wanted to do a comic strip about this guy named Bulbut who just goes through these, like, kind of like Dick Tracy, and goes through all these different, cases, these mysteries he has to solve. And he was always going to be in San Francisco, and he was actually kind of an old, I was talking about this or thinking about this just today. He always, when I drew him 10 years ago on my Flickr account, I have character studies, and he was always an older guy. He was like middle-aged, and so he's always like in my mind this established like figure in the community who was a detective, and he would just go through all these like hardboiled detective things, like Dick Tracy in a way. So that's kind of how the book and my feeling back then, how they kind of merged. And so, in a way, this book is sort of like the origin story of Bulbut before all these adventures come about.
That makes sense, because he's like, it's very much it's an immigrant story.
Yeah.
And it is an origin story. Mm-hmm. He's one of like several men, like, seems like almost fairly anonymous at the beginning, and then like slowly the camera starts to focus in on him.
And I wanted to focus that whole pan in the beginning of kind of the view from the Pacific, and it's coming, Pacific where he's from the Philippines, and then it morphs into like this point of view of going towards the California coast in America. And so the whole transition east and west, I wanted to show that. And then when I started thinking about the book in 2020, as a pitch to D&Q as a second book to Boogie, to blame this on the Boogie, pitched this book, which, is totally different than the Boogie book. The Boogie book is like autobio about my family. And yeah, it included the whole, I wanted to show the backdrop of like the 1920s, the Filipino immigration experience in that time in San Francisco, because I felt that is something that not a lot of people know about still. including Filipinos or Filipino Americans. And so I felt the need that had to be in the book. You know, I'm not a historian, but I wanted to at least have people kind of be a gateway for people to learn more about it, and like read up about it.
It's occurring to me as we're talking, the suit as a through line, the suit as, you know, as we were saying earlier, being a very important part of the costume of the era, you know, they had very nice suits in all of those film noir movies, but also the role that it plays in being a diaspora and not having any money, and the importance of that one suit, and the importance of the suit that he basically steals and brings across the country with him, or not across the country, but brings with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. The suit was important part of the story, and like very different, like all these layers to it. Like there's the whole thing of these workers who, you know, their dreams were to have these glamorous lives in America. So the suit represents that, the glamorous movie star, you know, lifestyle. And then the whole thing of how is it to be a American or someone in, you know, Western culture? Sophisticated, you know, you're not an animal, you're not a savage or something like that. You're civilized, and the suit represents that. And then the whole thing with like being a man, being masculine, the suit is, you know, a costume of like of your gender and of like your status. And so there's a lot of layers that go on with that, and just also like the contrast between like having to do menial labor and like in having this dirty job in the fields, and then making sure that you actually have this clean suit to kind of present or have the appearance of a certain type of person. So yeah, the suit is like a really huge part in a lot of different ways, talking about people's place in the world. In society. There's
that very clear dichotomy early on where they're all, you know, working these like manual labor jobs, and then I don't know if it's once a week, but it's that thing of, you know, going to the dance and like paying the women to dance to you, and it's very aspirational.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And yes, I wanted to show that, and then I wanted to show, you know, like part of historical fiction is not just showing the historical parts of like, you know, events that happen, but also the personal and the emotional part of things, and humanizing the whole thing. Like these aren't just like statistics or facts in history or years or trivia. These are people's lives and the lives of like their families, and yeah, that's the basis of coming to America, is like having certain hopes and dreams fulfilled. So yeah, I just wanted to show that.
If and when you do future books, that it will chronologically progress the story, but we get glimpses of his past life. You know, obviously his wife, whatever is happening to her, is this very central character. I assume that she will continue to play a role in future books, but have you left open the opportunity to explore his life before?
Yeah, I mean, I think in future there's always going to be. I have always seen it like there's flashbacks of like, you know, why is he motivated to do certain things or need to have to make certain decisions, and so I think things in his past kind of motivate those things. They're all in the book itself. There's glimpses of like what happened in the past and how that has affected how he does certain things. So yeah, that's always going to be a part of, I think, Boba's personality is how he was treated in the Philippines, or how he, you know, his relationship with his wife. Like we still need, you know, there are things left unanswered with that, and so yeah, there's always opportunity to, not just for his character, but all those other side characters that is interesting that I like to play around with.
Your parents were obviously a different generation from the characters here. Were they ultimately a resource when you were doing some of the, I guess, historical or cultural research here?
Yeah, totally. So like they're the kids of these guys. So it was, I interviewed my mom and my aunt, and because my grandfather and his brothers are actually part of this generation, the Manong generation, the generation that I cover in the book in the late 20s. And they actually were a part of the group that came from the Philippines to the Bay Area. And so it was really a cool discovery, because I always knew that about my family's immigration story. Like, your grandfather came earlier, and then we came later in the 70s, and you just think, it's trivia for you. It's like that's the family history is the line, it's the timeline, and it's also a way to like say, yes, I'm American, so I belong here. But you don't really see in the context or a broader context of that they were part of this huge wave of mostly Filipino bachelors that paved the way for a Filipino community here and across the U.S. So I got to interview my mom and my aunt about their father and their uncle's time here. And it was fun. And I think it was fun for them to like relive and to like discover things. And it's also feels like it's just so important, because it's, these people, of course, have passed away, and there's a lot of these unanswered or just stories that haven't been written down, or so there's a lot of open-endedness to it, and a lot of stuff based on oral tradition. So it's just a great reminder of like how much needs to be documented, especially histories of groups of people that are marginalized. And especially times in history where the U.S. kind of would like to rather forget and not look back on. So yeah, it was a good. They were good. They were a huge reference or huge important part of the research. And then there was just so much. And I was like, this was happening during the pandemic, so I had to rely on a lot of things that were online. And so there's like this whole digital archives that a lot of historians and archivists and librarians, especially in like ethnic studies programs here in San Francisco and San Francisco State, there's just like a wealth of like articles and newspaper archives of like articles and news clippings about like the Watsonville riots and just like the anti-Asian, anti-Filipino sentiment at that time. Just like all these columns and essays about how Filipinos just need to have their like independence so they can just leave and then just stay in their country. And so it was just a really good, just really like thankful that all exists, and that's just again a reminder that we just these things need to be documented and put somewhere. And thank God for libraries and because they had a really great library of photo references from that time, and from San Francisco and the Bay Area and all these Filipino organizations that like have written articles and interviews of men that were a part of that generation. And so yeah, I'm just thankful that people have thought to like write books and write down history, because it's just really important, really great resource to have.
The racism, it's what created the conditions in a lot of ways, but it feels more like a backdrop in the book. There are certain moments where they sort of like, move outside of their area. They end up in places, I don't want to say that they shouldn't be, but places that they aren't welcome, certainly. But it's not the central focus in the book.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I wanted to show what kind of situation these people found themselves in, but also that Filipinos existed in America at that time, and they actually had real lives, and they had, families, and they had, they had like apartments, like they were just human beings, basically. I just wanted to say is that they existed, and like, especially like in this genre, there's not a lot of, Filipino representation or Asian representation, or they're just like, usually they're just like the butlers or like the waitress in the Chinese restaurant or whatever, and so I wanted to show that they existed as people that were just that lived in America at this time. So I wanted it to be like a simple, like a normal, ordinary, like life, and that a part of their life was dealing with casual racism, and discrimination.
Casual to a point,
and
right?
Systemic.
And systemic, but also beyond that there are moments where it's really jarring. I mean, I keep going back to Bobit, and I can't remember the woman's name. Again, they end up in, I think they're trying to go to a restaurant where they shouldn't be, and it's really jarring because suddenly it's in your face in a way that it wasn't when they're
right.
I don't want to say keeping this, you know what I mean?
Yeah. They were not welcome in certain places. And it was interesting also because, you're in San Francisco Bay Area and you think that, this is the most, one of the most diverse places in America. And, you think they were always welcome. But,
that's it. That's ignoring a lot of,
a
lot of what happened to the Chinese in particular. Was
Right. Yeah. So you just think like, and so it's like, no, that isn't, that wasn't always the case.
How did your family end up in Pittsburgh?
My mom got a medical degree in the Philippines, and she got a job, like a medical residency with the University of Pittsburgh Presbyterian Hospital, and so that's how we wound up. They came to Oakland. They were going to live in Oakland, San Francisco, and then this job came up in the 70s, and then they've lived there all their lives, really, which is really cool. Yeah, and so I was born and raised there.
Was there a cultural community for you out there?
For me personally, I didn't see one. I mean, like, I lived in a very predominantly white suburb in Pittsburgh, and so. But there were friends of my mom. They were all doctors and their families, so that was sort of the community. And then you'd go to school and you'd see like one other Asian person, and you'd feel like, okay, that's my community. and so it was a two-person community.
Is anyone from the continent would suffice?
Right. So not particularly. There wasn't one that I found when I was there.
Pittsburgh is super interesting to me. I've been there a handful of times, but mostly over the past decade. Certainly what I thought Pittsburgh was and what I actually encountered Pittsburgh, in the teens and the 20s are two very different things. But also, and this is historically true, obviously this has changed a lot as the Bay Area's gotten more and more expensive, but Oakland to me has seemed like a kind of a historically working class town in a similar way to Pittsburgh.
I mean, it's like sort of I don't know. I mean, I don't know too much of it as a working class, but because I always see it as like an art town, like a very creative, very political town. But
it's always been political, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like the sister, the neglected sister to San Francisco. I mean, I don't know if like Pittsburgh is neglected.
The town, not the city.
But like with Pittsburgh, there's a lot of like no nonsense. Like we don't deal with BS. Like bull crap behavior. Like it's. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they kind of do have that same kind of small town feel. Like there is sort of a community feeling in Oakland. Like Pittsburgh can have a community feeling in certain neighborhoods. Like, so like it doesn't feel as big as San Francisco. And, so in that respect, I feel there's a connection there. Obviously the sports teams are mid-market. But yeah, I just feel like they are sort of like, they're not they don't deal with BS, and they're not trying to be something, that they aren't, type of thing. And, they pride themselves in what they're good at, and, and what they, so it's like, art, community, family. So Pittsburgh is like that art, community, family too. But yeah.
I work at a tech site. That's my main job. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I've been out there is for robotics stuff. And that's, obviously CMU is out there, and now there's a lot of companies that have sprung up out of it. But that's been hugely transformative for the city. And that's a big part of the reason why I'm going to Detroit for the first time next week, and I'm going into it with a similar kind of notion that I had about Pittsburgh initially. This is like a Rust Belt city, and that it was obviously depressed for a really long time.
Right, steel mills, yeah.
Yeah, but it seems like it's transformed pretty dramatically over the past, 15, 20 years.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, I remember, like, in the 90s, I think that was the time when it really, they called it the Renaissance. There were a couple, like, phases. But they changed the whole perception that they were this, like, a city of smokestacks, and you couldn't even see the city. It was all, pitch black because of, and I remember even then the buildings were all dark and full, like, just covered with soot. And I thought that was just sort of like what it was. It was like, oh, this is made out of, I don't know, what is the dark color? Like a stone, like a, and I was like, oh, and then I just realized, no, that's actually dirt. So like with like 1 year, the Carnegie Library, they totally sandblasted it, and it was like, oh, that's the true.
That's what buildings are supposed to look like.
Yeah, and then after the 90s, it was this whole renaissance of, like, there's a cultural district, there's this whole theater district, arts and medicine, so like UPMC and like all the medical and, like, and technology, and so it definitely has changed for sure. And it's just like I think that's another thing about Oakland and Pittsburgh. It's just like a cool looking city. It's just a really, definitely the bridges. Yeah, it's really fun and great weather. And, but yeah, I can, we're talking about it, and I'm thinking about it. There is that small town feel, like, of just a, community, definitely,
When I was out there, well, obviously pre-pandemic, so it would have been several years now, but I went to Frank Santora's place to interview him, and I was like, oh yeah, this is what it's like for most people who live here, like, I'm like, it's that thing of like going to a city for work, and you're, going to office buildings, and you're staying at a hotel downtown, and you're like, oh no, this is a nice place.
Yeah.
And it was something that I hadn't experienced, like, solely being there for work.
Yeah, it's a nice, like, place you actually want to settle down. Oh God, am I actually saying that? But
if you're in the market for getting a house, then it's a consideration.
Yeah. But it is. It's like it's nice, quiet, and like it's just a great place to raise a family. But there's like a really fun, cool arts community, and I don't know exactly where Frank's, but I'm assuming, I think it's in Lawrenceville, and Lawrenceville is like totally has changed. Like that was like a total working class, old kind of community, of like, and now it's like this burgeoning art and like all these bars and fun stuff to go to. So there's like it's a lot more. I mean, it's always been vibrant, especially because of the arts. But I think it's even more exciting and fun and livable. I
hear from a lot of children of immigrants that there's often this pressure, obviously, coming to, in a lot of cases having struggled a lot to provide a better life for your children. And then obviously, your mom being a doctor, I'm wondering what the conversation was like when you told her you wanted to go to art school and be an artist. It's probably because they're just so used to, like, they have other friends who are in the medical profession, and they've heard those conversations they've had with their kids. And I think they've always, like, probably swore to themselves, like, we are not going to be those parents. We're not going to be the ones who are like, you should be a doctor or a lawyer. Even though my parents were doctors and lawyers.
you need to have a doctor. But it was, my dad was more focused on, you need to get a degree. Like, I don't care what it is, but you need to go to college. That was his thing. And so if it was art, fine. Yeah, that's fine. But like, you just need to get a job. And so that was what he was laser focused on. And then when I got a degree, he's like, okay, bye. Like, that's it. So when I talk about art, like even to this day, like comics, I think it was only until probably this book came out and like good reviews and like actually going to book events that my mom like was actually like, wow, like, okay, this is a thing. Like, this is kind of exciting. But still, like, you should, still get a job, right? So there's, there's always going to be that, like, you're always concerned about, like, you're gonna make it, because, them coming as immigrants, like, the whole thing is about survival, right? It's about, like, actually living and not, finding a job that you can, like, actually live. And so, so I think that's always going to be first generation, like, mind is, like, just survive. Find a way to survive through all this. As
you said, you're getting good reviews in some high profile places. I think you got starred in PW, which is obviously a really big deal, and you got around up in Kirkus and all those places. For your mom, this is perhaps real in a way that it didn't feel real with your earlier books. Mm-hmm. Does it feel that way to you too?
I feel like it feels more real just because I am focused on it full time right now. And so I'm like, it has to be real to me. Like, this has to happen for me. No, but of course I still get, like, just this morning, I just talked about imposter syndrome, like to my husband. Like, I don't know about this. Like, when I was gearing up for this interview, I was like, I don't know what Brian is trying to interview me. Like, I don't understand. Like, he's gonna, like, ask me all these, like, comics questions and, like, about artists and stuff, and I am just, like,
you have not listened to my podcast.
I know. No, I've listened to it, and I was like, it could just be the people that you're interviewing, they're just, well.
I noticed how thrown you were when we talked about sports for the first 20 minutes of the conversation.
I was like, okay, this is what he's asking me, the sports topics. So I gotta get my list of sports names.
I get it, and it's not... I don't want to say it's something everybody experiences. I talked to somebody last night. I interviewed somebody last night, and he's like a successful comedian. Mm-hmm. He's on television, and talked about how it's a constant for a lot of people. It's there, and there's no level of validation can ever make. I mean, I'm in that boat too. No level of validation could ever make those voices fully go away.
Yeah, but I'm very thankful. I mean, I have so much gratitude, definitely, of like the good reviews, especially for this book, because I'm so, people just know me from autobio stuff, and so I was very afraid of what the reactions would be, just like, why is she doing this book, or like, well, she just did not get this right, or so I'm just very thankful for that. So I think especially in this time in my life, and especially with the pandemic, I know that you need to really savor all of your wins. And so I'm definitely trying to do that more and not be so down on and not waste time being down on myself, even though I do. But I try to not be as down. And I know, again, my time, with my age, that things are fleeting and things like change, like a drop in a hat, and then, you just don't know what's going to happen. So you just sort of have to savor those moments and just focus on those. But yeah, I still think that I'm just like always wondering, like, why is someone want to ask me these questions? Why is someone trying to publish me? I don't know. Like, why are you doing that? So yeah, I am always cautiously suspicious about everything. Paranoia.